Welcome to the DebateDrills Academy. My name is Rafi Piliero, and this is the public forum topic analysis for the Nationals 2021 topic about social media. So, what we're going to be doing, we're going to talk about what the topic is, define some of the key terms in the topic, provide some context for what some of the debates are, and then discuss positions for both the pro and the con. So you see the resolution here. Resolved, in the United States, social media is beneficial for democratic values. We'll first discuss what those specific words actually mean, and then we'll provide the context and the arguments on both sides. So what is social media? The issue is that it's not legally defined. There's been a lot of literature about why social media is something that it's easy to give examples of, but that it's difficult to find a clear term that is separable from the rest of the internet, because many aspects of the internet can have components that are analogous to social media, which makes it very difficult to separate out social media from the non-social media parts of the internet. So the closest definition that people have really been able to come up with is that it's an interactive web-based platform for users to interact with other users. And again, that is construed rather broadly because many platforms can have that. So for example, if a website has a chat box, does that make it social media? We know clearly what's inbounds, like Facebook is obviously social media, but what about something like that? Does that constitute social media? It's hard to say. So examples include things that we use all the time: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. You can think of tons of ways that you engage with social media on a regular basis. So beneficial for, it is not phrased as a policy statement. The resolution is not making a prescription that we should increase social media or anything to that effect. It's rather more evaluative. It is claiming that social media is something that has been beneficial for democracy. Is it good or bad for democracy is the question. So it's not something that predisposes itself to perhaps a prescription about what we should do. It is more evaluative. Democratic values. So these are not country-specific. Yes, the resolution does specify the United States, but democratic values are not things that are specific to one country or the other. Instead, it just tends to be values that are associated with a liberal democratic state. The civil liberties, the civil rights, etc. that come with that. So think liberty, equality, checks and balances, representation. Think of the rights that are enumerated within the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution as examples for what some of those democratic values look like. Again, this is broadly construed. This is not necessarily a specific bundle of rights, but rather more the broad portfolio of rights that can be associated with being part of a democratic state. Some additional things to flag with the wording of this topic. The first is that prescriptive plans don't make a ton of sense. It doesn't necessarily make sense to say X actor should do Y specifically here. Because, again, this resolution is not prescriptive. It's not a policy statement. It's evaluative. But you can specify something in a more evaluative sense. Like, specifically, you can say X particular social media platform is democratic or is not democratic. So specification can still work, but it needs to be done in a way that makes sense within the confines of the topic, not being a prescriptive topic that is proposing something particular. So plans and counterplans that compete off of a particular platform is good or bad could make some sense. So some important context. Obviously, there are concerns now that social media companies are too powerful or anti-democratic, so discussion about potential antitrust violations by some of these large social media companies. Some people are concerned that social media companies are getting involved in politics too much, others are less concerned. More broadly, just about the power that social media companies can have. And of course, there's also the discussion about disinformation in social media. So potential interference in the 2016 election through Facebook disinformation, the idea that Facebook, or I guess social media more broadly, can lend themselves to polarization. People construct their own information ecosystem, which can be corrosive for democratic values. There are those types of concerns that you're reading articles about constantly that are coming out about many of those concerns. Some arguments for the pro side. The democratization of information. Social media lowers the barrier to entry for information for citizens to have access to. Previously, information was harder to come by, but over time, information asymmetries have declined. Before, obviously looking way back, before the advent of the printing press or newspapers, information was passed along through word of mouth. Of course, the printing press and newspapers resulted in a decrease in the barrier for information, where information could be democratized. And now it's the tip of our fingers. You don't need to pay for anything. You just need a Facebook account or Twitter to see tons of news automatically. That, whether because of cost or because of just inconvenience, it was previously harder to get information. But now you've all the information you could ever need at your fingertips. Political organizing is another argument, that social media has made it easier for campaigns to have effective ground games to get people involved in politics. So a real turning point here was the 2008 election between Obama and McCain. The Obama campaign ran a terrific ground game in large part because of social media organizing, which was really the first time there was a modern campaign of that magnitude that was really running a super effective ground game on the backs of social media. That social media offers a way to get citizens, ordinary citizens, involved in politics, not just political junkies, which again can increase the amount of knowledge people have about politics and their involvement. And of course, just letting people express their views. That it allows a more vibrant marketplace of ideas. People can make arguments publicly, can really engage with others. So of course, there are arguments to the contrary of those, and we'll discuss that with the con arguments. But an important consideration to keep in mind is that, again, you can specify a particular type of platform. You concerned that maybe TikTok doesn't add much to democracy? No problem. You can say that Facebook is what is most democratic, or vice versa, that there is the potential for specification. Of course, there are topicality or theoretical questions about is it legitimate to specify. We're not going to tease those out here, but that is an option if you are willing to defend that specification is legitimate. There is no logical reason why you could not justify, perhaps, that a specific platform for social media is uniquely democratic. So on the con side, counterplans or offering a proposal to do something instead don't make a ton of sense in this topic, for the reason being that it's not prescriptive. It doesn't make sense to offer a counter proposal if there's no proposal to begin with. So counterplans don't make a ton of sense, with the exception of plan-inclusive counterplans that specify again, that really compete off of the fact that the resolution is evaluative. So if the affirmative, or if the pro or the affirmative in this case is saying that the social media platforms are democratic across the board, you could say, sure, that's perhaps true, with this particular exception. You would need to, of course, establish in cross-examination or in their initial speech that they are defending, in fact, that all forms of social media are democratic for this to be a competitive option. But if they do make a broad claim like that, it is, of course, possible for you to say, we agree with most of that, but not all of it. So, in short, certain types of plan-inclusive counterplans could make sense in some situations if you want to argue that some social media platforms are democratic, but others aren't. Other arguments, one is disinformation. As mentioned before, social media does lower the barrier to entry for information, but it of course can allow an overflow of information, some of which is low quality and actively poisons the well of public discourse. That's anti-democratic because then it's just a new form of censorship. Instead of censoring by cutting information out, you censor by overloading and sort of diluting the valuable contributions that take place in public debate, which is a arguably more insidious form of censorship, which there's been a lot of research on that. That is what censorship in the digital age looks like, not cutting information out, but just overloading with bad information. So that's, of course, something to think about as well. Another potential angle to take is about antitrust, or about the power that is given to various social media-based entities, that they don't really have checks and balances, they can remove people from platforms, there's just no real check on what they're able to do and the power they can quickly accumulate in the hands of a few companies that, again, control the flow of information online, which means that they wield enormous power for just a private entity, and the government perhaps needs to be more involved in that. But the question then is that democratic or not? And then, of course, polarization. People construct their own echo chambers. They silo themselves out from competing views, which just ends up resulting in groupthink. It results in people just having confirmation bias, which anti-democratic, if you can see the effects on polarization currently. People on both sides of the aisle can't really talk to each other. That's an argument you could also establish. So to conclude, think about social media in your daily life. It's something that's certainly very proximate for all of us. How does it really affect you? And then think about that across a society. What types of incentives does this create? What tendencies does it create? When you have these platforms that, again, we use them in our daily lives, how does it affect how we live? And how might that affect society as a whole? That can help provide context, make the topic less abstract, but really help you understand the ramifications of social media for society as a whole.